Join me as I dive into the fascinating details of Maneka Gandhi's historic Supreme Court win from January 25, 1978, and see if I can uncover the reasons behind its significance. Maneka Gandhi, Varaoturi. Union of India is undoubtedly a landmark case that has had a profound impact on the landscape of personal liberty and constitutional law in India. This case has been a beacon of hope for many, and its significance cannot be overstated. The outcome of this case has far-reaching implications that resonate even today. It's a story that needs to be told, and I'm excited to share it with you. The year was 1978, a time when the Indian judiciary was still navigating the complexities of our newly minted constitution. It was an era of great change and upheaval, and the courts were grappling with the nuances of individual rights and state power. This was the backdrop against which Maneka Gandhi's case would unfold, a case that would test the boundaries of the Constitution and push the limits of judicial interpretation. At its core, Maneka Gandhi v. Union of India is a story about the struggle for individual freedom and the importance of due process. It's a tale that raises fundamental questions about the role of the state in our lives and the extent to which we are willing to surrender our personal liberties to the whims of the government. Maneka Gandhi, a prominent journalist and activist, had her passport impounded by the government citing reasons of national security. This seemingly innocuous act would trigger a chain reaction of events that would take her all the way to the Supreme Court. The government's arbitrary action had far-reaching consequences, impacting not only Maneka's personal and professional life, but also raising critical questions about the scope of state power and individual autonomy. Maneka Gandhi's passport was impounded under the Passport Act, which grants the government sweeping powers to seize travel documents at will. But was this act of the government justified, or was it a gross overreach of its authority? This was the question that would come to define the trajectory of this landmark case. The government's actions raised the specter of an all-powerful state, where individual rights were mere suggestions, not enshrined guarantees. The impounding of Maneka's passport was not only a personal affront, but also a challenge to the very foundations of our democracy. It was an Orwellian nightmare come true, where the state could, at its whim, restrict an individual's freedom of movement and expression. Maneka's fight was not just about her own rights. It was about the rights of all Indians to live their lives free from the shackles of state oppression. As Maneka took on the government, she was met with a wall of resistance. The state's lawyers argued that the impounding of her passport was necessary to protect national security, a conveniently vague term that could be stretched to justify all manner of abuses. But Maneka was undeterred, convinced that her fundamental rights were being trampled upon. She refused to back down, taking her fight all the way to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court, led by Chief Justice H.R. Khanna, was faced with a daunting task. Could they reconcile the competing demands of state security and individual liberty, or would they succumb to the government's pressure and sacrifice Maneka's rights on the altar of national security? The very fabric of our Constitution hung in the balance as the court grappled with the weighty issues before it. Maneka Gandhi's case was not just about her own personal struggles. It was about the struggle for the soul of Indian democracy. It was about the rights of all Indians to live their lives with dignity, free from the fear of state repression. Her fight was a beacon of hope, illuminating the dark recesses of state power and shedding light on the importance of individual autonomy. As the Supreme Court delved deeper into the case, it became clear that Maneka's plight was not an isolated incident. It was a symptom of a larger malaise, a sign of the times in which we lived. The government's actions were a manifestation of a deeper problem, one that went to the heart of our democracy. It was a crisis of faith, a crisis of trust, and a crisis of values. The government's lawyers argued that the state had a legitimate interest in restricting Maneka's freedom, citing the need to protect national security. But Maneka's legal team, led by the venerable jurist Nani Palkhiwala, countered that the state's actions were arbitrary and violative of her fundamental rights. They argued that the government's actions were not only illegal, but also unconstitutional, violating the letter and spirit of the Constitution.